If you can see, I want to show you, it's much easier to make this cake than you might think. You'll just need a pink blank cake, and then I'll show you how to make all the decorations. And the neat thing about this is, sometimes cake decorating can be a little time consuming. So it's nice to do this stuff ahead of time. I want to show you how I make these little corals first. So this is the fondant that I prefer using. It's from Satin Ice. And it's important when you're not using the fondant to make sure and keep it in the bucket. And I like to keep the fondant actually comes in these blue bags. So I like to keep the fondant in the blue bag and kind of twist it and keep it in the bucket. So for the mermaid kit, I have three different colors. I have this really pretty rose color, and this is made by Color Mill. I'm curious what colors that you like to use. You can put it in the chat. And you'll notice too that when you first get it out, it's going to be a little bit stiff. So you'll want to kind of knead the fondant a little bit at first, and it'll just make it so it's a little bit more pliable. And not only did I add the color to the fondant, but I actually like to add something called gum tex, so Tylus powder. Sometimes you'll hear about it as CMC. And that just makes it so when the fondant dries, it's going to be a little bit more firm. So I have my pink already. And I'm also going to do this Color Mill. It's a really pretty color called Tiffany. So that's this color here. And I'll show you how I add the color for the lavender. I didn't want to do every single color because it takes a little time. So you'll see I have a little bit of lavender left over from another project. I'm just adding a little bit of white. I'm just going to start kind of kneading it to get it going. I'm going to add a few scoops of the gum tex. You'll see it just comes in a powder form. And then always make sure to shake up your bottle because sometimes the colors can get a little bit separated. And I tend to use oil colors just because if I want to make any chocolate pieces, I can still add the same color for the chocolate and also for the buttercream, and it'll stay the same color throughout everything. And it's not a bad idea when you're mixing color to wear gloves at this point because I tend to forget that sometimes, and it's not uncommon for me to have purple hands then. So you'll see when I first start kneading it, it's going to be a little bit marbled, but you just keep kneading it and it'll eventually turn into a nice solid color. See, now it's just turning into more of a color throughout. So no more of the marbling. Okay. I'm just going to take a little piece of this off and I'm going to make sure and put it back in my bag so it doesn't dry out. And I want to show you how to make these little coral twists. So I have a fondant rolling pin. I just find that it's a little bit easier and more manageable to roll out the fondant with this rather than a bigger rolling pin. And I'm going to roll it into a piece about this big or so. And it's about this thickness. Going to take a knife, and I just want to make sure the edge is nice and flat. And now I'm just going to cut very long triangles. So cut it like this, and then like this. So that's the shape that I'm after. And then once I've done this, I just simply twist it. And if it gets a little too long on the end, you can just kind of snip it off a little bit. And that's it. And then typically typically what I do when I'm working and making these fondant pieces is I have a baking sheet like this, and I've lined it with parchment. So I'm just going to put my piece on the parchment, and I'm going to let it dry for about 2 days. And then once it's nice and dry, then I just want to keep it in a covered container just to keep it clean. And I like to do maybe a couple of violets, maybe a couple pink, maybe a couple of this Tiffany, just some different colors of this coral. The other thing I like to do for the mermaid kit is I use a lot of molds. So these are some of my molds. I'll show you how I make this big mermaid tail. So I like to make this one in the rose color. And I'm just going to kind of guess how much I'm going to need for this bigger mold. Also, one thing I want to show you, if your fondant ever gets sticky, you can actually use cornstarch, and I just have it in this pouch. It's just easy to kind of disperse on the fondant. And also you can even tap it into the mold like this, and I can just kind of shake it out. So what I do is I start to roll it kind of in a big snake, and then I just push it in this piece of the mold here. And then I'm just going to push it into this one side of the tail. And the more I kind of push into the mold, the more I'm going to get all these fun details. It might be hard to see on camera, but this mold is really fun because it has lots of little fun details. And if you have any excess, you can kind of just take the back of your thumb and just kind of go like this to get some of it off. And then once I get to the end here, I just kind of take my thumb and kind of wipe off the excess. And I want to kind of make sure that the fondant's kind of level with the mold. Okay. And then I'm just going to kind of take the mold and kind of peel it back. And you see I have a tail. And you can, for your mermaid cake, sometimes I'll kind of angle it like that if you want, or you can keep it straight, whatever you have in mind. And then I'm going to put it back on my parchment. I have another tail I like to use that's a little bit smaller. And this one I like to make that violet color. I wanted to let you know too, all of these products that I'm using, if you sign up for my email list, I'm going to send you all of the different products. And then there's kind of a video part 2 where you see me put all the pieces on the cake. So here's my violet color. I'm going to do the same kind of thing where I kind of roll it into a bigger snake shape. Kind of push it on the bottom of the mold. Now it gets kind of narrow here, so I kind of have to kind of pinch it to make it a little narrow in this area. And then push it kind of to the right like I did the bigger tail. And this takes a little bit of practice. I've done a lot of these, so I feel like I could kind of do them in my sleep, but you know, you'll get there with practice. And then the same thing with this side, I just kind of pull the rest of it off. Now, this is going to be a decoration for my cake, but just to let you know, there's something else you can do is if you take a toothpick, you could actually insert the toothpick in, and then it could be a cupcake topper. Once it's dry, it'll stand up like this in the top of the cupcake, which is also kind of cute. So those are my 2 tails. Anytime I have any of these molds that have a shell, What I think of trying to do is I think of trying to put the amount of fondant that would fit into this without kind of heaping over or not having enough. Seems to be kind of the best way. So I'm going to guess I need probably about this much for this little shell. And see how that fits nicely into the cavity? And then I can just pull it out like that. So of course, if I'm wanting to do some of these smaller shells, of course, I would obviously use just a tiny little bit of fondant. So maybe about like this. And it's nice to have kind of a variety of maybe some bigger shells and some smaller. So there's the really small little shell. Let's do some that are in that kind of teal color. I find that Color Mill is a really nice brand. I feel like it gives you really nice trendy colors without, sometimes with the colors, I feel like you sometimes have to mix colors, and sometimes that can be a little hard, I feel like, because sometimes you might not mix the right amount, and it's a shame to have to waste some of the fondant. So let's do a little sea turtle. I'm going to guess kind of how much I need to put in this cavity. And sometimes I underestimate, so you can always add a little bit more, and I feel it getting sticky, so I'm just going to add a little cornstarch. And maybe I could have put a little bit more, but I think this will still work. And the same thing with this, I'm just going to kind of peel it out. So there's our cute little sea turtle. I'd like to make a few of these different kind of corals. And I usually make this in kind of the teal color. Now this mold is a little bit different than the other one. I kind of do it a little bit differently. I start doing a tapered snake, so kind of skinny on the very end, then going a little bit thicker. And then I start just kind of placing it into the cavity. So that's the one side, and then I want to do this side over here as well. The same thing, it's kind of a tapered snake. And then just pushing so you make sure and get all the detail. And then there's just kind of one in the middle. And then I'm just going to peel this back. Then if you have any little parts that you need to trim, that's fine. You can just trim it with a knife or an X-Acto knife. Okay, so hopefully you get the hang of doing some of these different molds. I also wanted to show you. So this is a piece that I made several days ago, and you can see, I mean, these ones are still really pliable, but since I made this several days ago, it's nice and firm. It's going to hold up well. So if you look on my picture in the very back, I actually did a few little sails, and I wanted to show you how to make those. I made these actually this morning, and I think they're really pretty and they're really fun to do. It's almost like craft time. So what you'll want to do is I have a container of water here. And the neat thing about these is you can make them any color you want. So these ones I made pink, but whatever color you add to the water is going to take on that color. So I can make purple sails, I could make teal. Since I made pink before, maybe we'll try another color. I think maybe I'll try this lavender color, see how that comes out. So I'm just gonna, and the other thing is the more color you add, the more saturated they're gonna be. So you'll see these ones are fairly dark pink. I had quite a bit of color, but if you wanted them a real light pink, just add just a little bit. So I'm gonna add some purple. And then what we use to make these are actually spring roll wrappers. So if anybody likes Vietnamese food, this is what you use to make spring rolls. And this is kind of an abstract thing. So, it doesn't have to be perfect. I usually just kind of cut them where I want to. I'm going to stir up the water just a little bit to distribute the color. And then they just need to soak for a little bit. You'll see when they first go in, they're going to be rigid like this. But after they go into the water, they're going to soften up. And then I take parchment paper like this, and I'm just going to sprinkle it up. And I purposely, when I'm sprinkling it up, I purposely want these little peaks and valleys. Because then once I place the rice paper on, it'll actually create this nice, it's not going to be flat. It's going to actually have really pretty waves. Let's see, these need just a little bit more softening up. And actually, I might make this one a little smaller. Anybody have any questions so far? No? Okay, so you'll see it's nice and pliable now. And right now, I can be the artist and kind of decide how I want it. I do kind of like the end to kind of come to a point just because it's a little bit easier to put in the cake that way. One thing with these, it's just kind of like the fondant pieces. You are going to want to make these ahead, and I would let them dry for at least a day or two. Like I said, I made these ones in the morning, and they're fairly dry. Okay. So I'm just going to set these aside to dry. One thing you can also do that looks nice is you can, once they're dry, you can actually just add a rim of gold going across the top, and I'll show you how to do that. So I take luster dust, and I'm actually going to mix it with some vodka. I have a palette here. And you don't need too much luster dust, maybe about like that. I have a bunch of edible paintbrushes down here. So I'm just going to mix it up. You just really want a nice paintable consistency. And then I can take my piece and just paint the very ends. See how it just, I feel like it kind of just dresses it up a little bit. And then some of the piece is actually going to go into the cake, so I don't have to do it all. But I could do the same for this one if I want. And have fun, experiment. Maybe you could add some sparkles along with your color. Cakes are fun because they're so creative. There's lots of different options. Okay. So like this.